Management Research. Hello and welcome to the Management Research podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eugene. Hello and welcome to my next mini-series. As you know, with the previous episode, we finished our mini-series dedicated to the SWOT analysis. And I have been thinking about what would be a good topic for the next mini-series. And as we have recently published our book on process management and burnout prevention, and as we are receiving a lot of feedback and many requests to participate in podcasts to help some firms, to help some individuals, I thought that it could be interesting that I just make a small deep dive into what the book is about, and maybe it may be interesting for you. But I have noticed that if the book has a word burnout in title, nobody wants to read it. People are afraid of burnout the same as you are afraid taking in your hands the book with the name depression or bipolar disorder or any type of illnesses, although burnout is technically not an illness. And that is why I decided to call this mini-series The Employee Wellbeing and Manager's Wellbeing Using Process Management Tools. The main idea of this mini-series is to give you some insights from the book, maybe pay your attention to great things that we have written and that may help you, and also to explain the mechanisms of why burnout in the workplace appears and what we can do in order to prevent these issues at work. Actually, this would also work for home, but as by the definition of the World Health Organization, burnout is a work-related phenomenon, we call it mostly the work. But let's be honest, sometimes what we do at home is actually also work, just a different type of work. And yes, I have seen people who are in a burnout state at home, but who relax at their work. So both is possible, and just pay attention, maybe it is something for you. In this episode, I want to talk about the history of the book, how it came to this book, and why we decided to write this book. I think it started 2016 when I was starting to look at the job market, because I was a postdoctoral researcher at the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, and if you are a postdoctoral researcher, you continue conducting your research, but you also look at new vacancies and try to find out what is new on the market and what are the good positions for you. I had many people who really helped me by advice, helped me consulting me about what are the good things to do. And one of them told me that, Eugene, you need to write a book. And I asked her, why should I? Because usually if you apply for a job somewhere at the university, they want to see your academic publications, which are usually the articles. And she said, yes, the articles are the key point, you have to have them, but they also need to recognize you for something that you have done, for the main topic. And for this, you need to write a book. It should be the first summary of your research results, of what you have done before, and it would provide you a kind of societal stand, what you stand for, what you do, and how they should know you. And after having this advice, I didn't know what to start with, because I worked in different fields. I tried to apply my skills in the field of strategic management, and in particular managerial and organizational cognition, where I investigated the impact of emotions. We had recently started a project with the burnout and burnout prevention and process transparency in Ukraine, in the healthcare sector of Ukraine. And I have done studies on relational models, and I have done studies on organizational capabilities, heuristics, and so on. But I couldn't crystallize what is the good topic, because I would also wish that it's not only a book written to have it, but that somebody reads the book. And then I contacted another friend of mine, a professor, who told me, Eugene, you have to find something that we don't know much about, because this would make the book interesting. This would make a good positioning for you. And I was at the moment mostly working in the field of strategic management. I taught strategic management at the Frankfurt School, and in the field of information systems, in particular process management because I was part of the process lab, kind of information systems lab dedicated to the topic of processes in organization at the Frankfurt School. And I couldn't decide what to do because strategic management, there are hundreds of books written and they are already established theories written by established scholars. And I didn't know what could be my contribution to the field of strategic management. I could contribute to something very small, specific field, but I was not sure. The same applied to information systems. I was relatively new to information systems as well as relatively new to process management, and my knowledge was not sufficient to write another book about process management. Moreover, we have plenty of books about process management, and the field is established, we have a lot of established scholars, so I just kept searching. And I think it was the year 2019, before the COVID-19, when I all of a sudden understood what I want to do. It was the idea actually driven by the two factors. The first one, a suggestion from another scholar who said you have to find some intersection between the field that you investigate. You have to find something where people don't know much about. So it's interesting. Strategic management is interesting, but we know a lot about it. Process management, we know a lot about it, but what about the combination? And here we have all of a sudden a kind of interface where we have not so many papers written. And the same applies to strategic management and emotions. The same applies to information systems and emotions. So you can find a kind of interface which is criticizable just because people from both fields will criticize you because you are not enough from their field. But it creates also a different point of view that may draw attention to some issues they haven't thought about before. The second reason that led me to find this topic was one of my applications in one of the universities in the Netherlands, where I usually, if you apply for a position at a university, you try to see what is the profile of the university, of this faculty, of this department, and so on. And I noticed that there are technical university and they have to teach organizational psychology to engineers, which is very interesting intersection because the engineers, they think differently, and we now work on the paper that explains actually how we think in the field of engineering and information systems, or in German Wirtschaftsinformatik or Wirtschaftsingenieurwesen. So these are these intersection fields and they do think a bit different, not like the organizational psychologists usually do. But you have to teach them, and you have to teach them the concepts such as motivation, relational models, leader-member exchange, job demands and resources, and so on. And while applying, I wrote an application, a cover letter, and I thought, wow, this could be a great topic. How to explain psychological issues to those people who work with processes, and mostly at this information systems level, this engineering thinking level. How can we transfer the knowledge? And this was actually the start of writing the book. And then, having the topic, I came to my supervisor at that time, Yevgen Morman, the co-author of the book, and I said, Yevgen, we have to write it. Moreover, as you are more from process management field and I am more from the organizational psychology field, we have done a lot of interesting studies that we did because we had conflicts, because we disagreed. And the results of these studies were interesting, fascinating. We did these studies for fun, but they led also to the best publication results. Just because we disagreed, we tested, we found something, and we published the information that was actually demanded from the field. And that is how Yevgen and I started writing the book. That is how we decided that we need to develop a good structure that will be interesting, mostly for practitioners. Because we know a lot of things in academia about organizational psychology, human psychology, cognitive psychology. We know a lot about information systems, business process management tools like Lean Six Sigma, lean management, or total quality management. We need to bring them to practitioners. We wanted that the book will be read by those people who will apply the knowledge. And this is how we started, and that is how we decided to develop the structure of our book. In the first chapter, we decided to start with a brief history of process management, because we wanted to show how it evolved and why we believe the field or this discipline is now at the crossroad. Then we wanted to briefly introduce the notion of job demands and job resources, the psychological notions, in a way that those people who work with processes understand them. So the idea was that the first chapter might be not interesting for those who are business process management professionals, but they will be interested in the second part, in the second chapter. The opposite should be true for the organizational psychologist. They know already a lot about burnout, about how it appears, about the psychological and physiological job demands and resources. We wanted now to explain them how the work organizing work, from the view of a manager, from the view of a process thinking, from the view of a business process management professional. Then we decided to move on, now having the basic knowledge, to move on to the third chapter, which would be the early signs of burnout and how can we use the established tools from business process management to indicate, to find out the early signals of mental health issues appearing in an organization. Then we proceeded to actually how to apply different tools to curate these issues, how to rebuild the processes, how to analyze the processes regarding mental health issues, regarding how to understand which processes, which activities within a process lead to a high emotional exhaustion, how cognitive exhaustion, and eventually to burnout. We provided several tools that we're going to talk about in the next episodes. And we finalized it with the last chapter about how to actually explain it to strategic management people. Because whatever the initiative you have, if you want to help people, if you want to increase the well-being of your employees by actually also increasing efficiency, effectiveness, and productivity of their work, we don't go at odds with it. If you apply our method, it will increase both. Then you need to explain it to top managers. And top managers, they think in terms of capabilities. They think in terms of the global abstract concepts. And we also wrote in the final chapter what is an organizational capability and how one can develop a burnout resistance or even a burnout resilience capability. And this is briefly the structure of the book. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the first chapter, where we're going to briefly discuss the history of process management and why we believe it is at crossroads now. I hope it was interesting. If you want to know more, stick to this podcast, wait for the next episode. If you want to find our book, I will leave the link to the book in the description. And check your library. Most likely your library has access to this book. If not, you can ask in the library that they get access to this book. Then you can save much more money if several people will read it in your organization or at your university. Then probably you will save much more money if you just ask the library to purchase it. Meanwhile, wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.